Welcome to the show. This week's FailRace versus the community was A-class British cars, and we start at the Silverstone GP circuit. We run into the first corner. Everything was relatively calm. I think a Lotus 11 ended up losing control, slightly bumped into the side of Daniel. However, we had got round the first corner safely, unfortunately. The same couldn't be said for Maggis and Beckett's. At some point, an Exige gets spun round. Not entirely sure how that one ended up. Doing sort of a perfect 360. I ended up in the back of a Monaro. Amazingly, neither of us suffered damage. These these large, heavier vehicles seem to be faring okay. Then we run onto the very long back straight. This is where the Vantage has its advantage. My car was rather powerful, 600 horsepower, 600 torque. Made it one of the fastest cars here in a straight line. Of course, not quite so good through the corners. It was rather heavy at 3,900 pounds. This was not a light vehicle at all, but I wanted to go for something different. There were lots of small lightweight sports cars. That's what a lot of British vehicles are, so I went for something a little bit different. I wanted a bit of straight line speed, and you certainly got that with the Aston Martin. The price you paid was not quite so good through the corners and not quite so good on the brakes. The brakes were certainly the most noticeable, but you will see we come onto a straight and I have huge straight line speed. I catch up to a lot of the cars in front of me very, very quickly down this back straight. I'm looking to go around the outside of an Astra through a far chicane. Daniel actually was in this one for once. He got connected and didn't lag out. He's driving the grey Jaguar D-Type, although he would have a problem in this opening race. I had a look at the inside at bridge. I think I scared the crap out of an Astra that did not expect me to, to put my car there. I was on the outside for the next corner. The Astra, though, being front-wheel drive, was understeering and couldn't quite get his car turned. Bumped into the side of me, and I managed to get the position. An eventful opening lap that I had somehow managed to survive damage-free in my Aston Martin. Further round, and a Vauxhall VX220 that had another eventful start to the race, was looking to go around the outside of a Lotus Carlton into the first corner, thinks better of it, dives to the inside, and as the Carlton runs a little bit wide, the Vauxhall manages to get the pass done. A good solid overtake, and the Vauxhall had so much speed that it drove up the inside of an Aston Martin into Maggis and Beckett's. The VX220s were pretty damn quick. I would get stuck in quite a long battle with a Lotus Esprit. I run a little bit wide through bridge, not a good idea. The Esprit ends up on the outside through the next corner. However, the corner after that, again, is still going to the left, which means the Esprit is on the outside. I keep my car on the inside, I defend, and the Esprit can't really do very much. It's very hard to get around a car that's defending heavily here, which is what I was having to do in my Aston. Then we come on to the front straight, and now it's just a drag race down to the first corner. The Esprit's on the inside through this corner, but my Aston has so much speed I can keep it out wide, and the Esprit's not really far enough alongside, and it's not a particularly big braking zone into that first corner, so I managed to hold on to the position. In front of us, there was an almighty tussle for second place between two Monaros and a Lotus Exige. Not the normal sort of cars you see racing against each other. We come on to the back straight. The Exige was phenomenally fast through the corners. I think it got fastest lap in the end of the entire race, but did not have the straight line speed of the Monaros did, meaning that it was having trouble getting past them. The minute it got through on one corner, it would be the next sort of part of the track would then be a straight, and the Monaros would simply drive away from it. I've said this many times before in these, it's very hard to overtake the car that's faster than you in a straight line, and the Exige was certainly sort of having its difficulties. I was still arguing with the Esprit, and although we were sort of racing hard, the cars in front were slowing each other down even more, so there's now going to become a five-way battle for second place, and we always know how they're going to end. The Exige was trying to find its way past the Monaro. The Esprit got a much better drive out of the chicane. We're going to go too wide through bridge, which is not very fun, and not very fun in a big heavy Aston. I'll tell you that I managed to keep the position and didn't end up on the grass, but in doing so I run very, very wide, and this is why this section is very hard to overtake on, because you can defend both ways. I have enough acceleration to keep my car around the outside, and if you stay around the outside, you hit yourself on the inside for this final corner, and this final corner is incredibly long, and still the Esprit can't find a way past. We have another drag race down the start-finish straight. This time, the Lotus I guess a little bit better drive out of the corner. It's got a little bit sort of further alongside and will have a dive into the first corner. I'm not sure how I managed to do this, but I kept the Aston on the outside around turn 1. Sideways and a wheel on the curb, but I kept it around there, and then I have the speed, I have enough acceleration to stay on the inside of the Lotus as we come through Maggotts and Beckett's. We go too wide through the first section. Eventually the Lotus decides it's probably best to kind of give up on that one. I don't think I've been too wide through that corner before. Yeah, it's not advisable. Still, the Lotus isn't giving up, but as we run onto the back straight, there's a Monaro in the way. The Lotus gets a little bit boxed in. We sort of double team past the Monaro. We then both go flying past the Exige as well somewhere. Yeah, the Aston was rather quick. It all gets a little bit crowded at the corner at the end of the straight. The Exige ends up out on the grass. The Esprit couldn't quite get past the Monaro on the inside. I then have a great drive up towards the next corner. Outbrake myself a little bit, and the problem is the Monaro sort of can't turn in. We end up in a little bit of trouble. The Esprit ends up getting boxed in. The Esprit's now looking around the outside. Gives up on that one as we proceed to go too wide around the next corner. The Esprit cuts back to the inside. I think the Monaro doesn't quite realise where the Lotus is and slightly pushes him out onto the grass by accident. The upshot of it is I get to the inside and eventually manage to get the position from the Monaro one very wide on the exit, and it all goes a little bit wrong as the Esprit and the Vauxhall have a little bit of a coming together. Although it went remarkably better than I expected for sort of 4 cars wide, or 4 cars battling over the same position. At the front, and the thing, they're actually being fairly quiet. The Jaguar had got to the front and stayed at the front for almost the entire race. On the final lap, the Monaro was literally on his rear bumper. The Vauxhall just ran out of time. As I said before, this final section, you can get overtakes here, but it is a rather tough place to be overtaking around here, and the Monaro just simply ran out of chances. He tried everything he could, even gave the Jag a little bit of a bump on the final corner. It almost cost the Monaro his second place. The Exige got a much better run with the Monaro being sideways and everywhere, but the Exige didn't quite have the straight line speed. In the end, the Jag takes the win, the Monaro in second, the Exige, in third, and the Esprit in fourth. I ended up binning it at the first corner at some point and dropped back to sixth. It was a bit of a shame because my Aston was actually quite nice to drive at Silverstone. We move on to race 2 at the Nurburgring GP circuit. I haven't raced here for a while in Versus the Community for a very good reason, because the first corner is normally chaotic, and sure enough it was yet again. A poor Esprit getting turned around and being involved with a collision with a TVR. I had managed to survive it though. My tactic of hug the inside of the corner and hope all the chaos happens around you had worked. It was still pretty busy on this opening lap, and Aston Martin goes a little bit wide and loses about 4 positions in this one corner. I find myself following very closely to the back of an Esprit. Daniel is making his way through the field as well. This is not a track that I particularly liked. It certainly didn't suit my Aston Martin around here. Somebody was having a look trying to get the inside of me. There's a little bit of a bump between a Jag and an Aston. However, everything had gone fairly well apart from the first corner. Everybody got around the rest of the track relatively smoothly. The Lotus found itself under attack from the Carlton. They run into the very, very far chicane. The Carlton almost manages to get a move done. It's very, very rare you see an overtake through there. It's an incredibly fast corner and very, very tough to get an overtake. It's also very, very narrow through there. Daniel's Jag then manages to get up the inside of the Carlton. The Jag was monstrously fast in a straight line. Maybe not quite as quick as my Aston, but it was much better through the corners. Overall, the Jaguar D-Type was a very, very good car. We have another Aston that was very fast in a straight line, this time a different, the older version of the Vantage. Having a look at trying to get past a VX220. Can't quite do it through the corners. The Vauxhalls were a pretty good car overall as well. They just lacked the straight line speed, especially compared to some of the more high-powered vehicles, such as this Aston. You can see the amount he is gaining on that back straight. The Vauxhalls aren't slow either. Through the corner, this is not a particularly long run towards the chicane. The Aston has so much speed, he can get past the Vauxhall. The Vauxhall, of course, is much better through the corners, much better handling than a very powerful Aston Martin, and will be right on his tail through these corners, but can't do anything about it by the time they get to a corner. I would imagine quite frustrating driving the handling car on this track, and sure enough, the Vauxhall continued to follow the Aston Martin. over the course of the lap, I think the Vauxhall is probably a little bit quicker, but it just can't find a way past because there are some really very long straights here at the Nurburgring track, and the problem is now comes a Jaguar D-Type that is also very fast in a straight line. The Jag soars alongside the Vauxhall. He gets past him briefly for the briefest of seconds, doesn't quite have the brakes of the Vauxhall as they come into the first corner. This is the advantage you get with the VX220. It's incredibly good on the brakes, gets a little bit too sideways though, gets a bit out of shape. The Jag's sliding around a bit as well. Eventually the Jag gets the move done. The Vauxhall ends up slightly out of position. Yeah, the lack of straight line speed on this track can be a little bit of a problem. As the leader would find out, another VX220 that was leading the race, led from the start and escaped a lot of the chaos early on, a lot of the squabbling early on. However, he was being caught by Daniel, and he's being caught by the Esprit in third as well. And again, the VX220 was really struggling in a straight line. Very, very quick through the corners. Gave Daniel perhaps a little bit too much space. You don't quite have to go off the road for them to let them pass, but the Jag just soars past in a straight line. The Jag is a quick car, probably one of the faster cars for the straight line speed, but even so, the Vauxhall was, yeah, they were really rather struggling. Quick through the corners, as you can see, he was right on the back of the Jag through that final corner, but then it comes to another very, very long straight, and now he's got the Lotus to worry about, that is also going to soar up alongside. The Vauxhall goes very, very defensive into the first corner. The Jags haven't, no, sorry, not the Jag. The Lotus, oh god, I'm getting confused with cars. Has a look, tries to go around the outside. In the end, I think he was trying to do a cutback, and the Vauxhall took a very tight line. The Lotus kind of ended up running out of space. But it wouldn't take long before the Lotus would find his way past. The Vauxhall was having to be very, very defensive into pretty much every corner now. The Lotus, the 80s Esprit was another quick car overall. The Esprit, it just had the straight line speed, and the Vauxhall was really, really struggling to deal with that. On a track like this, it's pretty hard to deal with. The Vauxhall gets a big slide after hitting one of the rather large curves, and the Esprit pretty much soars past in a straight line. Vauxhall has a think about looking at the inside, but can't really do very much about it, and the Esprit has moved up to second. Again, you could get a good run out of this corner, but it's followed by a very long straight, and you can't really do very much about that. At the front, Daniel was to take his first victory in versus the community for quite some time. Lag was to make his car a submarine briefly, and then a flying car, and then a hover car. Lag is funny on Forza. When you're watching a replay, it's funny. When you're driving, not so much. The D-Type was being kept fairly honest by the Esprit behind him. I wonder, a couple more laps, what would have happened. The Esprit certainly did close the gap on the final lap. Would have been interesting to see how they fared. But yeah, Daniel takes his first win in versus community for quite some time. I ended up quite a way down the field, having not had the best of race. I think I ended up spinning at one point as well. We move on to our third and final race at the Road Atlanta circuit. My car was very quick off the line, nowhere near as fast as a Jag. There was one of the, I can't remember what they're called, Jaguar XF or something, XFR. I hate driving the car. The car is the worst handling car in the world, standard. Phenomenally quick in a straight line. The first corner had gone smoothly, the top of the hill didn't. Somehow a yellow VX220 ended up spinning around in the middle of the track. Daniel ended up on the dirt with a Vauxhall insignia, and the top five all got away absolutely fine. We were not involved in any of the chaos that went on further back, and as we ran up towards the top of the circuit, everything was all relatively calm and relatively controlled, except for a very fast Jaguar that I would imagine was a bit scary. The same couldn't be said further back. Yeah, that's 3 wide. That never ends well. A Vauxhall's escaped the track. Yeah, it was a Vauxhall. I think that was a Vauxhall that very briefly flashed across shot and fell off the road. Yeah, this was a bit of excitement, a bit of a large group. When you see a large group of cars like this, you know it doesn't normally end well. Everybody got away through the top of the hill, and then they kind of get spread out down this back straight, because it basically sorts the cars out in who's the fastest in a straight line. It turned out to be Daniel's Jag, of this group anyway. It was the Jaguar D-Type that flew past the Aston Vanquish, that then tried to come back at him under brakes, and that didn't work either. The Aston ends up falling off the road. At the front, and there was an Aston Martin battle for second place with the DBS. I think it is running slightly wide out of the chicane. I stick my car on the inside, and then we go kind of too wide. I think the DBS decided to back out of that one. And 2 heavy Aston Martins going through there is yeah, pretty scary. The Aston then ends up out of position for the next corner, dropping back to third as the VX220 overtakes him. The leader fell off the road at the first corner, so I suddenly found myself in the lead for all of a corner. As the Vauxhall then dives up the inside at the top of the hill, I end up all out of position and get a little bit squashed off the track. I fall from first to fourth. In fact, I go from what was it, third to first to fourth in the matter of about 3 corners. I would like to have stayed in first. That would have been nice. But yeah, there was plenty of overtaking going on at the front, and I have to chase back after the Jaguar. Unfortunately, there was to be a bit of a weird laggy incident, sorry. I don't quite know what happened. The Jaguar lost control of his car, ended up hitting into the back of a stricken back marker that was recovering to the pits that would kill his car and put quite a few vehicles out of the race with the ensuing mess. At the front, however, there was to be a change for the lead as the DBS had a dive up the inside of the VX220. That was the stricken car, the Morgan, that was a bit unfortunate in all of that. He was doing what he should. He was off the track. It was, yeah, I think the Jag lost control over a bump. The VX220 and the Jaguar D-Type tried to go too wide through the final corner, and it ends badly for them, promoting me up to second, and Daniel had recovered to third, and it wouldn't take very long for Daniel to get past me. The race then became all rather quiet, if I'm honest, following a few incidences on the opening lap and the crash with a stricken vehicle. There was about the top 6 or 7 were moving without damage. The rest of the cars had been through pit lane at some point, so there was very, very little going on track. This Morgan and Jaguar D-Type were the only 2 cars that were really close to each other for large portions of the race. A VX220 was fairly close to me, but there wasn't really very much overtaking going on. There wasn't really very much action. The Morgan ends up just getting a bit wrong at the final corner. Very, very easy to do that. We saw a number of cars do that this race. We've seen it many times at Road Atlanta. Surprisingly, we didn't see anybody roll at all in this one. And that final corner here, is notorious for vehicles ending up upside down. On the final lap, however, Daniel had been gradually catching the Aston Martin, and it was on the very final lap that he got up to the back of this car. The Jaguar, incredibly quick in a straight line, cruises up alongside of the DBS, but the Aston goes very, very defensive into this final chicane. Daniel can't get past in the first section, but when you do go very defensive through there, you end up compromising your line quite a lot for the exit of the corner, and sure enough, Daniel fires his car up the inside. The Aston's only chance is to get a cutback on this final corner, which I did. I did that to something in a couple of versus communities ago, but the Aston just couldn't quite do it. The Jaguar's got too much speed, and Daniel takes his second win. Two wins out of 3 in this versus community. That's pretty good for him. I think I ended up coming third with the Vauxhall in 4th. So there we go. There was some pretty good racing in this one. I enjoyed some of the races. My Aston, it was different. I think I was the only one running that version of the Vantage. It was a pretty good car. I had some issues with it. The Jaguar D-Types were certainly very, very quick overall. However, yes, that is it for this versus community. The next one shall be held on Thursday, the 17th of April. We shall be running Open C-Class. There's going to be no real restrictions on the vehicles other than they have to be in C-Class. I'm not going to be banning vehicles, however, I'm going to say, as I have with the previous few of these, if you are the sort of driver who is expecting to be coming sort of towards the top of the field, or you've won these kind of things before, please don't turn up in leaderboard cars. Be creative, turn up with something interesting. I don't want just a sea of Edelans or a sea of MX-5s, or I don't know what the leaderboard cars are in C-Class. But yeah, be a bit more creative with your vehicles if you're likely to, if you're expecting to be at the top of the field. Makes it more fun for everybody, makes the races more varied, and makes them more interesting. If you wish to sign up to take part in the race, then you can go to our forums. I'll put a link in the description, and you find the FailRace versus community section, and the sign up thread will be in there. The race will also be at 7 PM British summertime, as it always is. However, that is it for today, so thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.